Dear audience, dear jury, Aristotle once said, happiness depends upon ourself, meaning that our view on life is what leads to happiness. Take it this way. Happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it and run after it, the more it will elude you. But as soon as you turn your attention to other much more important things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder. Happiness comes from the small things in life, the things we do not appreciate enough, the things we do not give much attention to, like the fact that we are alive, the fact that we are well, we are healthy, we can see, smell, and taste, we can feel the morning breeze as we wake up, and watch the beauty of our universe as the sun rises each morning. Did you know that internal roots to happiness come from almost any mental activity? From appreciating a tree, a flower, a wall, a design, a painting, to enjoying music, to contemplating life even. Learning new beliefs, new skills, new traits, or new habits can dramatically affect our happiness. As Socrates once said, the secret to happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. Happiness is one of the most fundamental and universal driving forces in us. Yet, it's extremely elusive. Even the people who have it all figured out are often deeply unhappy. That's because we keep on looking for happiness in the wrong places. It's not something that we search for. It's not concrete. It's something that is within us. It's something that's supposed to be unveiled inside of us. Happiness is a very important thing, and it's not something that we can touch. It's inside of us, and it's buried very deep under layers and layers of social pressures, illusions, and false beliefs. And instead of trying to get rid of these issues, we keep on looking for success or in hope to find happiness. Did you know that success doesn't lead to happiness, but happiness does lead to success? Did you know that a recent study from Norwalk University shows that people who are happy are 12% more productive? So maybe we should prioritize happiness, and success will follow automatically. I have personally learned to seek my happiness by limiting my desires rather than attempting to satisfy them. Did you know that happy people do not have the best of everything, but they make the best out of everything they have? And being happy doesn't mean everything is perfect, but it means that you have chose to look beyond the imperfections. Thank you.
Dear audience, dear members of the jury, opponents, good morning. When people describe what they most want out of life, happiness is almost always on the list, and very frequently it is at the top of the list. When people describe what they want in life for their children, they frequently mention health and wealth. Occasionally they mention fame or success, but they almost always mention happiness. People will claim that whether their kids are wealthy and work in some prestigious occupation or not, I just want my kids to be happy. Happiness appears to be one of the most important goals for people, if not the most important. But what is it? And how do we get it? In order to illustrate this idea, we must first define happiness as a particular concept, namely as the fact of waiting for something that one does not yet have, or seeing one's desires and expectations satisfied. But we should keep in mind that happiness is relative, and what makes other people happy doesn't necessarily make me happy. On the other hand, external routes to happiness include any action that utilize our external environment to contribute to our happiness. As an example, on a typical day, we take many actions like eating breakfast, talking with family members, working, going to school, playing soccer, or going to bed. These actions generate external effects that in turn affect our internal world. Our happiness is dependent upon the satisfaction of our values, and the most common way to satisfy our values and find happiness is through outside conditions. If we are hungry, we eat and we satisfy the hunger. If we want the love and the fun of a friendship, then we can be a friend to other people. In addition to that, we can set goals, plans, and take actions to get the job we want, get more friends, material goods, or simply more money can make us feel more happy. According to Ed Diner, a psychology professor at the University of Illinois, wealth is actually correlated with happiness, particularly in poorer societies. Those first few dollars that move someone out of poverty contribute much more to a person's happiness than a billionaire earning her next money. And I will leave the member of opposition to expand more on that. Or, getting back to what I was saying, just a simple activity may provide interest and fun itself. And by choosing to do that activity, we get immediate increased happiness. It is as such that you can get a gist of our position and therefore see that their point of view is nothing short of delusional and could not be further from the truth. And just a little challenge to the other team, do you think it's possible for the internal state to make someone happy while they're mourning the death of a family member? Thank you.
Seeking happiness outside ourselves is like sitting in a cave directly facing north waiting for the sunshine. Dear ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dear jury and dear opponents, good morning to you all. I like to think of our world as this solar system in which we are the sun, because no one of us here thinks the same way another person does. Let me explain. We are the sun. Other planets, for example, Earth, are people. Mars are experiences. While I would say Venus are events. Why not? The interesting twist is we are the sun, we are the center of the universe. Everything revolves around us, isn't that right? Well, another interesting twist is each one of us here has their own universe. Think about it for a second. And we can often see that when it comes to topics like this one, where two parties disagree on the topic. For example, we have our own universe that makes us think that you can't seek happiness outside ourselves, while our dear opponents think the opposite way. Now, speaking of events, I like to think of them as, let me show you. This piece of paper right here. I don't know if you can read, but on the top it says, for example, April 2nd at 12 p.m. Mirwah is currently trying to convince his opponents that they are in the wrong. I got received this paper by life. My job right now is to fill the rest of the paper in. Now, denied for a second. Now this can go two ways. Either I can say a cuss word and I can probably lose this debate. Who knows? But I can also provide valid arguments to my dear opponents and we can win this debate. Now, let me go back to what I said earlier, because whatever the outcome is, this paper will just add to the other stack of paper sheets that I already have laying down. This is only 5% of the paper sheet. Our job is to fill the rest 95% of it. We all want happiness. We are all looking for happiness. We are going for that goal, trying to reach it, sometimes clumsily, sometimes gracefully. And sometimes, most of us at least work under this misconception that you can seek happiness outside ourselves. And you can see it here. But a lot of us just sit there waiting around, waiting for this paper sheet that's gonna say, for example, today you will find love. Or this paper sheet that said, today you will become CEO. But what would happen if you received the paper sheet that said, today you will lose someone who is close to you? And I like to go back to your point, leader of the opposition, and answer your question, because it's true, sometimes it can be hard, very hard to write those first few lines and be happy about it, but we don't realize the inner power that we have in ourselves. The moment we realize the amount of control that we have, and we have always been taught to love other people, but we have never been taught to love ourselves. We have always been taught to care about other people, but we have never been able to think that we can care about ourselves. We have always relied on other people for happiness, but we have never relied on each other's or on ourselves for happiness. So, since I answered your questions, I'm gonna leave you with a couple. What does your paper sheets look like, dear opponents? Tell me, what thoughts, emotions, and feelings have created the narrative of your life? And what systems have you imposed upon yourself? The moment you answer all three of my questions, the moment this topic can become debatable. Thank you.
You guys are very good at storytelling with the butterflies and the solar system. I really have, wow. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today I am very happy and delighted to be in front of you guys debating and speaking about this topic. And speaking of which, do you guys know who else is happy? Apparently these people are happy under the impression that it comes from their internal state. Now, as much as I wanted to, I didn't hear any definition of what internal state means to you guys whatsoever. So I'll do the job for you because you left our dear audience in pure confusion. And you know how my history teacher used to say that if you're in an exam and you don't know what the exam is about, you just take the paper and you just look at it like this. Just look at it from that's what we're gonna do. Let's just look at the topic from a very wide perspective. Now, internal states, let's say, internal states are about your mood, your feelings, how you feel. Now that's managed by something, that's controlled by something, because you don't just decide to be in a good mood or in a bad one. And it comes from for example, how your day went, if you spent some quality time with your friends, and so it comes from external factors. Okay, let's say internal factors are about health. So it's about your physical appearance. It's about something that is controlled by the activities you do, by the Medicare if you get any. So it's controlled by external factors. Okay, wait. Let's say internal factors are about wealth and success. Well, that's just money, and money is an external factor. So you see, guys, from whichever perspective we see this topic, we will always end up concluding that it comes from external factors. Now, as much as I hate breaking it to you guys, but your magical potion just doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, if it did, there wouldn't be therapists, there wouldn't be depressed people. I wouldn't be depressed. Come on, guys, you had one job today is to make me happy, and I'll just carry on with my sad life. Now, before I cry on stage, I just want to tell you the story, the tragic story of, Chris McCandless. Now, Chris McCandless is an American traveler who honestly died just so we can shine the light on the reality of our world. Now, Chris McCandless, just like any apparent human being in this earth, had enough of everything. He just had enough. He had to cut off everything. So what he did is he went to Alaska to live alone, to hike. And after all, what happened is that he died alone, just like Isaac Newton. But what happened actually is that he left a message on a share. And this message, I'll read it for you guys. It says, happiness is only real when shared. See, is only real when shared. It comes from the environment. Now, I'll break it down to you guys this way. You want to believe that happiness comes from inside the factors, but as long as there are outside factors that actually satisfy your happiness, you're just blinding yourself. Go ahead. Oh, it's time. It's time. Okay, so I was saying, happiness comes from, as long as you want to believe that happiness comes from inside factors, you're just blinding yourself, because there are outside factors that actually satisfy that. And now the day you will try and try to test your beliefs, just like Chris McCandless did, you're going to realize you're very wrong. Now, honestly, this is so sad, guys. This guy died just so we can shine the light on this misperception, right? Can we guys get a minute of silence for him? It's enough, I have a speech to finish. But I'll finish this speech with a very, very famous quote from a very fabulous and valuable philosopher, which is me. Just don't listen to them, okay? Don't listen. Happiness comes from outside factors, and you should believe that. What they're talking about is purely idealistic and too perfectionist for a true reality like ours. Thank you so much for listening.
Growing up, we are taught that happiness comes from realizing our material goals, from getting a new toy, buying a new car, getting a bigger house, a new job, and a larger paycheck. Now, the reason behind that is simply capitalism. It sounds weird, I know. But capitalism needs people to work, and people won't work unless they believe that doing so will grant them happiness. And now, yes, that is a common belief that was rooted into our beings, and it is difficult to fight it, but we will. My teammates and I have shown you, and we will continue on showing you, that the truth is there, and that we don't need anything to be happy. All we need is ourselves, because the facts are there. The fact is, the definition of happiness in Merriam-Webster is the state of well-being and contentment. And well-being could be defined as how you feel about yourself and your life. Again, it's about you, not outside conditions. In the outside world, there are reasons for us to be happy and others to be sad. A person would be dying and another would be born at the same exact second. A person would succeed and another would fail. One would be smiling and another would be crying. In reality, these two factors that are both happy and sad exist simultaneously. And so on, your personal emotional state cannot be determined by those outside factors, but rather by where you decide to look, by your perspective or your mindset, to say it simply. Now, let me explain it further and give you an example. Let's say that indeed, happiness depends on outside conditions. Let's say you go to a restaurant you like. The ambience is good, you're in good company, everything's good, and so on. According to the thesis of our opposition team, you should be happy. But then you look at the TV and flash news. You see a picture of kids that are dying from famine, people that are suffering from wars, and there you are sitting, facing a dilemma. Should I choose happiness or should I choose sadness? Yes, it is very confusing because reality gives us the two options, but the choice is ours to make. Authentic happiness comes from within. It comes from making wise choices, including choosing to be happy. Yes, when our external situation is going well, it might make it easier for us to make that choice, but it is definitely not the cause of it. You can be happy even when things around you are nothing like you would like them to be. It requires a conscious decision to choose happiness each and every day. And even scientifically speaking, happiness is related to your levels of dopamine and serotonin. And their levels, they depend on your health and how balanced your diet is. And that is definitely internal and not external conditions. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable audience, faculty members of the government, and members of the floor, good morning. After all what the government team already mentioned, it is widely clear that they are creating an ideal world in which you can create happiness from your internal state and within yourself. And that's exactly what positivism is. What is actually wrong with this theory is the fact that it's search for ideal and way too perfect standards of scientific manners, and its analyses are just too unrealistic when set aside with a complex social phenomenon. Yet, happiness itself is a really confusing and a hard state to define. So how comes for a simple word to define such a complicated thing? Adding to that, positivism's lack of empathy and consideration of the individual in the interpretation of aspects of this social phenomenon. The fact we're just living into a different world, an ideal world and a realistic world. The first one is when every single person is happy and living his happy life and creating their own happiness within themselves. And I mean, that's what we want, and we wish if it was the actual case. However, when it comes to the realistic world, it's the total opposite, because outside conditions are controlling our happiness. If we took a look on the word map of happiness created by the United Nations, we will find that Canada, America, Australia, Russia, Europe are rated as the happiest country, while on the other hand, Africa and South Asia are rated as the least. And do you know why these countries are not happy? It's because they are the poor country, the countries with a low rate in economy, the countries in which people suffer from lack of rights, the countries in which people try so bad to create happiness within themselves, but unfortunately they cannot because of outside conditions. On the other hand, when it comes to the happy country, They are just living their best life. They have balanced life, good quality life, have many rights as more than the other countries, and personal freedom. Now let's take this subject from another point. Exactly. Yes?
Yeah, so you said according to the United Nations, some of the happiest countries are, you were saying United
The world map of happiness?
Yeah, you were saying United States, I remember Russia, right? China as well?
No.
What?
I didn't mention China. I mentioned China within the South Asian countries. Thank you.
Exactly, thank you. But you also mentioned that it's also one of the richest countries, and you have played on this economic role a lot during
I
your
will talk
debate.
about this later on in my speech. Thank you. On the other hand, we will find that happy countries that I mentioned before are actually happy because they have a balanced life, good quality life, more rights than the others, and personal freedom. From another point, and talking about money as an example, we will find that rich people are actually happier than poor people. And I know that you guys are going to say that, but there are poor people that are happy, but I'm sorry to break it to y'all because we cannot deny the fact that 84.6% of rich people are happy, while only 21% of poor people are happy. And that's due because the rich people can fulfill their materialistic needs and necessities, while the others cannot, and that's according to the World Happiness Index. I mean, if internal state was the only thing that matters, can you give me example of a kid starving and happy, someone naked under the rain and happy, a kid that crave learning but he cannot learn and instead he works? Dear audience, are these hypothetical ideas and situations going to define your happiness, or are you going to join us and control your surrounding and environment to create your own happiness? Thank you.
Leader of the opposition, it's either you want to make it seem like life is a full-on funeral, or you're screaming loud and high into this microphone that you are defending only one single moment of life. And going back to the member of the opposition, a country with an outside conditions, yes, I've heard of that, but a country with internal state, that's a first to me. Who feels happy? The human. A quick reformulation to this topic would be, does happiness come from being human, or does it come from what's around the human? Today, in front of this beautiful crowd, I'll show you that this feeling is only provided by being human, and I'll be using Jean-Paul Sartre's reasoning, that of his book, The Being and Nothingness. Sartre said that, philosophically, before being born, there was nothing. Both tangibly and metaphorically, meaning that nothing had a value to us. We are the only ones that give everything around us a value. So after all, it comes from being human. Another reformulation of this topic would be the pursuit of happiness versus the happiness of pursuit. To put you more into context, we are defending... Yes, take it.
You said that countries have internal states. We're talking about happiness, which is an individual thing. Happiness, someone is happy, not people are happy, everyone is happy. So I don't understand why a country has internal state means our position is wrong. I do not understand how there's even a correlation between what you said and what we were saying.
Okay, thank you. You just said that happiness is an individual state. Thank you. Anyway, a short explanation to these words. A short explanation to these words. The pursuit of happiness, it doesn't always have to be a physical pursuit, but it's more mentally. It's the desire to achieve a certain mental stability, one that our opponents are struggling to obtain. Instead, they are happy to follow. The pursuit gives them pleasure. This is a perfect embodiment of their position would be the character Hisoka. Hisoka fights strong people only for his pleasure. But how long does that pleasure last? It lasts the duration of the fight. After the fight, the pleasure is gone. And it's replaced with a feeling of greed, a feeling of wanting more. His polar opposite is our epitome, Krollo, who seems to search for his identity to find true pleasure. He has founded a group of criminals. He kills people which slightly pleasures him. But the question is why? Why does he still search for his identity? when he can pleasure himself through other things? Well, the answer is that he is searching for internal happiness. And he knows that these outside conditions cannot procure that for him. Much more like Musashi, a Ronin that has fought the strongest school in Kyoto, but came on par with the third strongest samurai. A year later, much more mature, he came back to Kyoto and cut down the head of the school, but felt no pleasure. He was confused. But then he later on understood that this feeling of pleasure cannot be provided by outside conditions. He can only be happy through internal state. Started my speech with philosophy, and I'll end it with some more philosophy, because even though our opponents are science math students, I see that they can lack some of sharp thinking. I'll be calling upon the master of philosophy, Mr. Aristotle. Aristotle drew upon his knowledge about nature. He contended that what separates man from animal is rational capacity, arguing that a human's unique function is. Thank you.
Now, first of all, I heard my guy here talk about how we lack critical thinking. My guy, we're science math students. We know logic better than you do. And second of all, you said that I've never seen someone come to a debate and not even understand the motion. The motion says that individual state, which is happiness, depends on internal factors, which means when I said that happiness is an individual state, I did not say or concede that my position is wrong. In fact, you just didn't understand what I was saying. And third of all, there's still a lot to say. Now, third of all, I want to talk to the Prime Minister, not just the Prime Minister, even the government whip. They talked about philosophy, but just like Bernard Russell said, when science steps in, there is literally no weight for philosophy, meaning that once there is empirical evidence, philosophy is irrelevant. Now, talking to the Deputy Prime Minister, he said, and I quote, "The sun is the center of the universe." That's wrong, my friend. The sun is not the center of the universe. In fact, there is no center of the universe according to physics, but I'm not surprised since you probably didn't study physics. And by the way, each planet's movements actually do affect the sun's movement because of something called gravity. Now, talking to the member of the government who said that, who talked about capitalism. Let's talk about capitalism and communism and do a little comparison. When the Berlin Wall was built, there were two parts in Berlin, the Western Berlin and the Eastern Berlin. In the Eastern Berlin, conditions were miserable, and all people agree that people were not happy on the other side, the Eastern Berlin. Why? Because of the communist regime, because of the external factors which were miserable. So if you want to talk about capitalism, at least don't paint a fake picture for them and talk about the whole thing. Capitalism and communism. And is there anything else? No, there is not. So back to my own intervention. Kawkab Zumurruda. Do you know what Kawkab Zumurruda is? I hope you do, because Kawkab Zumurruda is one of the planets that we've all grew up on, in space soon. Kawkab Zumurruda translates into Ruby planet. I've never been a big fan of Kawkab Zumurruda because I'm not a girl, but I always liked Kawkab Action and Kawkab Mughamaras and always waited for Dragon Ball. But I'm not here to talk to you about my childhood memories and flex on you with space soon. Exactly, thank you. I'm here for debating, and so let's go back to the topic. Kawkab Zumurruda, which again translates into Ruby planet, is the planet on which these people live. It's a perfect planet, a peaceful, idealistic planet in which anyone can have the following monologue. My guy, you should be happy. And poof, magically they become happy. Now, I'm not a scientist, I can say that with confidence, but I know for sure that with my brain who has been trained under rigorous logic, that this does not match the real world. So let's see how the real world works. According to World Happiness Report, the most trustworthy source when it comes to happiness statistics, I quote, "There were significant increases in average sadness and worry in 2020. Now, thanks to my mathematical genius, I know that in 2020, coronavirus appeared. And what can I say more? Even the website says that the external condition, in this case, coronavirus, is responsible for the dip in happiness. It's just impossible to refute these statistics. But do you know what's even more impossible to refute? The fact that money contributes to happiness. I mean, having 2 dirhams means you can buy gum and chew it for 2 hours in class. And so without further to say, I just want to say that Kawkab Zumuro doesn't exist, it's not real, and سنعود بعد قليل.
Well, let's see what we found out from our opposition whip. He's science mod, did you know that? Well, after a short scientific lecture with our opposition whip, we can take you back to our actual debate. You said that if a family member dies, I will be sad. Well, of course I will be sad, but bringing him back to life is not what's going to make me happy, but my internal state. It's making peace with my inner self. It's trying to get through that on my own and dealing with that loss. It's not by bringing them back to life or finding an external condition. And you gave a POI to my friend. You told him a country's internal happiness. He spoke about it because you guys said a country's internal happiness. He didn't just make that up out of his own mind. Well, let's go back. Happiness does not come from money. It does not come from having a great job. It does not come from anything. And did you know that the country with the highest rates of suicide is actually China, and it still is one of the richest countries in the world. Thank you.
Well, عدنا. When we talk about sadness and happiness, we ought to think about therapy. Now, therapy is one of many examples I gave you just to demonstrate how unrealistic and utopian your vision of the word is when you say that happiness is about internal state. Therapy is a very valuable science nowadays, and it aims at supporting people and helping them through hard times using interactive conversations. And a lot of people believe that therapy is a good cure to sadness. And here comes the contradiction in your perception. If happiness really depends on internal state, people wouldn't go to a therapist when they suffer from depression. A lot of mental conditions wouldn't exist. Therapy wouldn't exist, and this leads us far away from reality. And that also implies that suicide rates would drop to 0. People who face problems would just decide to be happy, and they would. I'm sorry, but as much as I wish it was this easy, it's far from the actual reality. Thank you.
Oh man. So during most of your interventions, you talked a lot about the economic side of things, and I wanted to address that during the member of the opposition's POI, which unfortunately I couldn't because he said he will address it, but he didn't. Liar, liar, pants on fire. And I also wanted to address the opposition whip, which asked my dear friend why he even brought up countries. It's because your teammates did so. So to me, it seems like you guys were not really that coordinated during the debate, and I advise you to do so. And back to what I wanted to actually say in my POI, you guys talked about how most rich countries, and you guys talked about money a lot, and you said how most of the time it usually makes for happiness. But China is one of the richest countries, and yet it has one of the highest suicide rates. Anyways, you guys have still not answered our questions, and we have been patiently waiting. Thank you.
You know, guys, the funny part about your stories is that it's completely contradictory, and let me tell you why. First off, I'll start with the Deputy Prime Minister. You said that we should be the sun, other people should be the earth, right? Do you know what the earth, what is the crucial condition to a planet to exist? The sun. So that means other people need us, and you're being selfish here because other people need us, and therefore outside conditions are a crucial condition into internal happiness. And also, government whip. Since you mentioned Jean-Paul Sartre, do you know what Jean-Paul Sartre said about the existence of others? We need the existence of others to exist, and therefore there comes your contradiction in what you said. Thank you.
Okay, now first of all, I was speaking of the current system. Thank you for the little history lesson about communism and stuff. But really, I don't see how you perceive happiness and sadness. How is a person sad or happy? Do you imagine it in your imaginary planet that, hey, a person is either very happy all the day long, all night long, every day of the year, or is either very sad all day long, every day of the year? You speak of therapists. Do you think that when you go to a therapist, they tell you that you should change your outside conditions and that, I don't know, your outside conditions
The Deputy Prime Minister, you said that people in China are rich, but we mean that they couldn't fulfill their other aspects such as family, friends, food, and so many things. And since you guys mentioned ignoring external factors, happiness is a social phenomenon that everything contributes to, including family, money, and everything. So by excluding those external factors, I think you're missing the point. Thank you.
Existence is very different from happiness, and moving on to it, Aristotle said that happiness turns out to be an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. And I envy you, ladies and gentlemen, for your easy choice. You get to choose between a man that lived alone and Edmund's philosophy and Aristotle's philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that my dear opponents would use this and what I just said to extend their short-lived pleasure into happiness. But maybe you are right. Maybe pleasure comes from outside conditions. Let's see, what makes me happy? Suits. Do suits bring you pleasure? Some people here, if you give them 2 million, they would be happy. Or just a simple chocolate. It's all a preference. It's all a preference. But where does this preference come from? It comes from us. So even we choose the external conditions that makes us happy. And please, dear opponents, bear no hatred against us. We are just trying to guide you to true happiness, because we couldn't bear seeing the negative F-second on your face. Thank you.
Now, first of all, you said that, I said that individual states have nothing to do with the country's internal state. That's actually not, that's actually what I was saying, and you said that individual state means that internal factors are the ones that depend, on which depend the individual state of a person. It doesn't make any sense. It's just a panache, like we say in French, and I do not understand anything. It's just a mix-up. You mixed up what I was saying. Now, as for Japan, you talked about Japan. Japan, there are... Okay, China, which has one of the most highest suicidal rates. My guy, we talked about the communist regime, and in China there's the communist regime. Yeah. I talked about the communist regime. And as shown, the communist regime has a really negative influence on people's happiness. And so I just demonstrated to you with science, with logic, that internal happiness does depend on external factors.